moods and midlife, or moods and menopause. We're going to talk about the emotional domain of the 7 domains of midlife. My name is Dr. Kirtley Jones from Obstetrics and Gynecology at the University of Utah Health. And my co-host is Katie Ward, and Katie's a nurse practitioner in women's health and has a doctorate. She's Dr. Katie Ward in nursing practice, and she is on the faculty at the University of Utah School of Nursing. She's also a certified midlife women's health clinician, and this is the Kirtley and Katie show on midlife. And Katie, let me rant a little bit about the term involutional melancholia. This is a term that I was introduced to when I was in medical school, which was now close to 50 years ago. God, I can't believe that. And it was thought even back then that women necessarily, or at least white women, European white women, went through this thing in the middle of their life, whether it was hormones, some people said it was hormones, or whether it was social, where they just became depressed and they involuted. They just turned in on themselves. And I remember thinking, that's hogwash. And it turns out it is kind of hogwash. And although midlife does have a lot of stuff going on, and it could be that there's depression throughout many of the situations that arrives in midlife, but some longitudinal research has suggested that women, are more likely to get depressed and have difficulty with a major depressive episode in their 30s to 40s than in their 50s to 60s. So I think there may be an increased risk of depression in the perimenopause and early menopause in women who have had depression before related to hormones like PMS or maybe postpartum depression. But there's not an increase of the first episode of depression. Kate, do you have any thoughts on that?
First of all, I was going to say, I congratulations on involutional melancholia. That is a mouthful. The phrase I bumped into was climacteric insanity. So,
oh no, that's really a good one. Oh, I ate that one too.
that one, maybe that's a little older phrase. That would get you a hysterectomy, which would certainly give you worse menopausal symptoms right away and make everything worse. So, I think we've come a long way in menopause, and we're starting to talk about this in much more nuanced and thoughtful ways, and trying to distinguish what are hormonal changes and what are what's true mood changes or mental health issues. And so it's still a lot of that kind of sorting out what's going to be the best evidence-based treatment for somebody. But I think the thing I hear the most is, I just don't feel like myself.
Right, I don't feel like myself. Well, I've had the experience more than once of getting a call from a husband that was put forward to me that he wants me to see his wife soon as possible and fix her, because she wasn't the biddable, sweet young thing she was when they married at 20, and something's not quite right with her. She's not what she used to be. And part of me, not even having met the poor woman, says, well, Jesus, she's got a bunch of teenagers and you're probably being a jerk. And I don't say that, but I think, well, there are lots of reasons why you just don't feel like yourself. So when your patients are saying that, what do they mean, Katie? I'm not sure I get it. What do they mean?
It's such an interesting phrase because I think it expresses a lot of things. So then that becomes the job, is to figure out, is this just a bit of irritability and anxiety, and is that just that they're paying attention to everything in the world and that's making them anxious? Is it related to the other symptoms of menopause and amenable to menopausal hormone therapy, or do they really screen positive for a significant depressive episode or a diagnosis of depression? So those are the things I'm always trying to sort out. Is I'm usually giving my patients some kind of a questionnaire that looks for depression. If they're truly depressed, then we might talk about really a combination of things, including medication therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy or just therapy, as well as, whether or not they're a candidate for hormone therapy.
Yeah, it's a really tough time, I think. This time is one of the focal transitions in women's life, Katie, I think, because you have your birth, which is a really big deal when you're born, and you get all kinds of medical screenings, and there's a whole lot of things changing. And then there's your first period, and about your brain is completely rewiring itself. And so at adolescence, the brain can get a little crazy, but it's got some reasons to be crazy as well. It's a crazy world. And then with the birth of your first child, that's a big rewiring of your brain. But you've also got this brand new baby, and it's a time where you don't feel like yourself anymore, and you aren't like yourself anymore. And then midlife, whether it's hormones or it's because all these things are happening to your parents and to your partner and to your kids if you've got them, I think it takes a reasonably seasoned clinician to really listen to find out why women just don't feel like themselves anymore.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things I talk to patients about, and it's exactly that thing that you were just describing, is that the, we go through these major hormonal shifts. And, if I get all teachery here for a minute, um, depression, real depression is similar in boys and girls till puberty. And then girls start to experience twice as much of it. And most all women, when they have a baby, have something on a spectrum from baby blues to full on, postpartum depression and even psychosis. And, some women sail through the menopause and some women have a hard time with it. So I think there are a couple things. One, these windows of vulnerability for depression when your hormones are undergoing major shifts like that. There's definitely some kind of hormonal connection about how our brains are working. And I liked what you were saying about shifts in our brain. There's an author who I like who talks about it as just a little bit of pruning, that your brain is you know
Pruning and rewiring.
getting rid of some old connections and hardwiring some new ones. And I
Right.
think that is really consistent with what I see in the menopause, is that, you're going through, um, you know, a, 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 a bit of, having a bit of a brain rewiring. And, once the IT work is done, most people come out, with a better system, or at least
Right,
something
right,
a little
right.
bit more
You,
dependable.
I think that for me, as a neuroendocrinologist, sort of wannabe, as an endocrinologist in life, truly, I think of the brain state in the menopause as being irritability. The business about fluctuating hormones can make someone more irritable, meaning lights are too bright and sounds are too loud, and things they used to just be able to let loose, let go of, make them irritable. And it's not kind of unlike what some people experience with PMS, meaning they're not
Mhm.
really sick with PMS, but they just get cranky. And there are lots of reasons to be cranky. So, one, there's the hormonal lack of cohesion that comes when you're not sleeping well, or you maybe have so many hot flushes. And then there's the crankiness of your adolescence, or there's the crankiness of your partner, and then there's the crankiness of your parents. There are lots of reasons to be cranky, but then your brain is irritable. Estrogen withdrawal can lead to an irritable brain. Progesterone withdrawal leads to an irritable brain. It's more likely in rats to have seizures. So part of this business of the husband's calling fix my wife is that she lets off steam more than she used to. She's cranky about stuff. And I do think that um, although a full-blown depression should be treated very seriously as depression, the irritability might actually be better if people are having a lot of hot flushes and not sleeping well. That might be very amenable to hormone replacement therapy when you sleep better.
Absolutely, and I think that's exactly what I hear from my patients, is that they're aware of this. They're aware that they're popping off at things that bother them, and that used to be something that they just, let roll over them, but now they're not holding back. And if it's causing conflict, they're coming in concerned about it. So, like, I'm responding this way, and that's not what I usually do, and
Yeah.
it is causing conflict. And you alluded to this. There's so many things going on for people at this time of life. Like, it's just, you're often, as you mentioned, you're at, you've got your career, and you may be at the very peak of that, and your peak earning years, and you're busy, and there's lots going on there. and your kids, following most people's life course, you have kids that are maybe not quite launched yet, but are working on their own. Um, how do they kind of separate from their parents and establish their own identity as individuals? So that can be some conflict, and odds are it's not a new marriage, and there's some years of friction built up there, and frequently it is a time when your parents are starting to have their own health challenges. And I think for a lot of women that's in addition to hormonal changes, there are a lot of circumstantial changes. And then there's just the world around us, which is also a little bit stressful for everybody right now.
It is. And anxiety making, I think about them. So we talked about irritability, and then there's anxiety, which can also keep you awake, cause a little insomnia. So in our midlife women's clinic that I used to run, we gave a long questionnaire on what biggest complaints were, and they were often anxiety. There were a number of chief complaints, but anxiety was one of them. And there is so much going on in your ability to say, oh, I can deal with this later. There's anxiety can become with that irritability in the sense that normally when you're anxious about something, you can stuff it someplace and say, I'm going to deal with this later. But sometimes when you're not sleeping well, you're really not sleeping well. And anxiety becomes another issue to pull out how much of this is situational with happenings around them, or how much is that a brain that just wants to be anxious. And what worries me some is that I see a lot of my friends and patients, even in Utah, who are turning to alcohol to calm the irritability and to calm maybe the anxiety. And certainly it's socially acceptable because every TV show you watch where there's a power woman who's a lawyer or who's a detective or whatever, as soon as she gets home, she kicks off her 4-inch heels, which she shouldn't be wearing in the first place, and pours herself an oversized glass of always red wine. And I think, wow, that's a lot of drinking they're doing. And I don't know if that's in your practice, but many of the women I saw, well, how much? I usually have 2 glasses a night. And I thought that's 14 glasses a week. And then how big are your glasses? They're 5 ounces. Well, no, they're kind of more than that. And I'm worried about that.
They're a whole Stanley Cup.
Yeah. Oh, God. I should talk about my mother, but I won't talk about my mother who used a beach cup, the whole Stanley Cup. Yeah. How many cups? I had just 1 or 2 a night, and they were beach cups.
But no, I agree, Curtly. I think the alcohol, it's, there are multiple layers to this, right? So if somebody is just having a glass of wine with dinner, that might still disrupt their sleep. So
Mm-hmm.
So we can start there and talk a little bit about just any alcohol does change your sleep patterns. So I do ask my patients who are having trouble, the combination of trouble sleeping and anxiety about their drinking habits, because that, it may really be a time in your life where just even a little bit of alcohol plus a little bit of hot flashes plus some things that worry you is a combination that is really going to disrupt your sleep. Because if you wake up at 2 o'clock, whether it's alcohol or a hot flash, and then you're lying awake thinking about the things that you're worrying about and having a hard time going back to sleep, that's rough for anybody. But then you're right. I think we did see, especially during the pandemic, we saw alcohol use really accelerate for a lot of people, including people in Utah. Again, midlife may be a period of time where it's, maybe you aren't so busy with your kids in the evenings and you have a little bit more free time, and it's easy to have that second glass of wine, and it does become a habit and a ritual. And I think it sneaks up on people. And so it is important to talk about, and like you said, to really talk about, well, you know, how big is that glass of wine, and how many nights a week are you having wine? And
Well, I mention wine mostly because that tends to be for many women the alcohol form of choice. And I just don't know that women are that aware. They know that alcohol can relax them in the short term, and sometimes it may help them fall asleep. But and then in the critical time of night where you need to get your deep sleep or your transition to REM sleep, people are wide awake. So, and then they think, well, I'm wide awake because I'm anxious, so I'm just going to drink more. Or they don't always make that connection that what happened 4 hours after or 6 hours after their glass of wine, that or two glasses, that they're actually disrupting their sleep pattern because of the alcohol. And I it's a very interesting neurochemistry that I think a lot of people just don't click to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is, that is the first step, is to start to understand that, and then what I often do is just talk to people about, well, how would it be to take a month off and see if you feel different, and
Right, or safe drinking for special occasions. It's or however they want to do it. And I'm not judgmental as someone who drinks myself on occasion, but I clearly had to make some decisions back when I was deciding how I was going to sleep. In my own menopausal transition, it was best if I really had to watch my caffeine and my alcohol
mhm.
because I really needed to sleep when I need to sleep and I need to be alert when I was going to be alert. For me, that's
And
just how.
calories. I
Oh,
think that's the other thing, that's the other way in, is to, two glasses of wine a night is 20 pounds a year. So
well, it's not just that. When you've had that second glass, you don't make good food choices anymore. Give me a glass of wine, and all of a sudden, all those crackers and cheese, or that second helping of God knows what. It's like I don't have complete control over my appetites once I've had a little bit of wine.
and
Oh
I
dear.
one other thing I talk to people about, because it's an awareness that I'm starting to have more and more. It's easy to put all this responsibility on our patients, of, or ourselves, myself even, like I need to have all of this self-discipline. But socially, I like to look at the engineering of it too. I think a lot of alcohol companies are marketing their products to women more, that's been, you know, they've, it's an opportunity for growth, that women have their own disposable income. And you certainly see this if you just walk through the liquor store, the number of wine labels that are, clearly designed to attract female buyers.
How did they
So
know? How did they know? That's how I pick my wine. I want the cutest label.
I
I
want that
mean,
pretty butterfly.
I want, or it's something that's kind of funky, funny, something that's funny. As long as it's got, we used to our own wine stores here in Utah used to let us see the wine rating label. So mine was always, it has to be under $20. It has to have a cute label and be rated in the high 80s or something. But the label was often the most important thing. They
So,
know me, and I'm not even a big drinker. Oh no.
but I think for women to rise up and say, "Hey, stop that."
Well, we have to rise up and say, this is so much, this something is good for me, but it's become a middle class and upper middle class norm to just pull out the bottle of wine or something at dinner time for many women. And it's enhanced by what you watch on TV. And I don't
In
know.
good news, though, I think that there is a bit more of a movement to talk about this more. So I'm seeing
Yeah.
more and more, talking, kind of reframing it a little bit, talking to people about being sober curious. And there's a growing market for non-alcoholic beverages,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
a little bit more awareness of what I think we've been really talking about here, which is you know getting its own label of gray area drinking. That we're not saying somebody has a full on severe substance use disorder, but maybe drinking in that gray area where it's a habit that's sneaking up on you. So I think we are, there is more conversation about, a more nuanced way of discussing the issue, and a growing body of alternatives. You're
Yeah.
starting to see alcohol-free bars and lots of alcohol-free drinks. And so I think there is a commercial response to this as well, which is nice to have.
Well, the other thing I wanted to touch on during this emotional domain is I think that this is often a time of transition, our midlife, at the time that our ovaries are deciding that we shouldn't make more babies, which is a really good thing. our own children may be leaving, or they're not leaving soon enough, and our parents, and even friends, we start to lose our friends. So the concept of loss, what does it mean to lose people we love, either because our kids pack up and leave, and this could be a good thing or not so a good thing, or they move in with their girlfriend and their girlfriend's baby, and so what was supposed to be a quiet time for you now is not so quiet. I think this is part of what makes this a complex time in women's lives. For me, all these things happened. I lost a parent, and my son went off to school. It was this time, because I'm now past my midlife. I remember thinking it being a very powerful time for me to listen to my own heartbeat, but it still was connected. Those connections you cannot just cut when kids have left. You just can't cut the cord, and now you can't hear the signals anymore. You still either hear signals from your kids, or you make them, you make up signals that you're not getting from them. It's tough.
It is a challenging time, and I think, right, I agree with you. Right around that time that I was going through menopause, my youngest child went off to college, and I just lost my mother, and you do feel just a little adrift. And I used to run, and I would go on my running route, and I had this question I would sort of ruminate on, and I would ask myself, now what's going to make this okay? And that's been a very useful question for me at a lot of stages in my life. But I remember really vividly running back and forth and thinking, all right, now what am I going to do? And for myself, I went back and thought, if I could have been anything I wanted to be, what would I have done? And I kind of landed on a not really a career change, but I got this idea to go back to school. So at 50, I applied for a PhD, to become a PhD student in anthropology.
Oh, I know, Katie. I was thinking, what are you doing? That was my thought.
But
Yeah.
that's really how I came to it. Was I was you know I w- I after a long time of raising children, I didn't know what I was going to do with all that time that I had spent ironing uniforms and packing school lunches and going to swim meets. And so for a long time, it was just a question of, all right, what next? And that was the thing I asked myself, if I could have been anything, what would I have been? Because nursing for me was a very practical choice. But as I got thinking about, it's not too late. I could still go and study, stick my head in a completely different discipline, and it doesn't require a whole career change. Now, granted, I have a lot of privilege. I work here at the university, and I get half price tuition, and I didn't have to, pack up and go to a different school. But I think that I still think that that's not a bad framework for anybody. Is to say, all right, like, you've got half of your life ahead of you, and you still have an opportunity to reinvent yourself one or two more times. So, what would you
Well,
do
I
with
think
that?
I think that particularly framing it that way, Katie, instead of saying, "Oh, half my life, I only have half my life left. I'm almost done." Half your life seems like it, if you've maybe it's half my life, then my life is almost over. La la la. But thinking I've got a whole other part of my life ahead of me, and I think this gets into this U-shaped curve of happiness, which is an analysis of how happy people are, measuring starting in their 20s up until their 80s. And this is a worldwide assessment of men and women. And it seems like happiness is at its peak years are in its 20s, and then it kind of goes down in the 30s, and it goes further into the 40s, and then by the time you get to your 50s it starts going back up, and by your 60 or 70, you've got a lot of things figured out. Things don't worry you quite as much. So the U-shaped curve of happiness has been documented in people all over the world, and men and women. And in fact, currently some data suggests that American people who are over 50, in their early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, may be some of the happiest people in the world. And our younger people, our 20 years, having just come through the pandemic and are trying to find a job and find a house and live financially, aren't as happy as they should be based on previous year's data. But there is this magical turn that happens in your worries and in your happiness at about 45 to 50. It starts going up. It starts going up, I think.
I don't know if you've seen it. There's a interview Jodie Foster just did with one of the morning talk shows, and she just apparently turned 60 recently, and she's talking about how 50 was really a hard age for her. At 50, she was a little bit at loose ends and not sure where her career was going, and she just turned 60, and she's talking about how incredibly happy she is now, and that something just magic had happened somewhere in that decade. And so I think that's a lot about what you're talking about. That
Right.
in that, the peak of that transition, things seem really hard and overwhelming, and it's something I do tell my patients is it's going to get better. It's one day if you're Jodie Foster and you wake up and you're 60 and you're like, I am so happy. And what she said about it was that she's not competing with her younger self anymore. That she's just enjoying what she's doing, and she's no longer feeling like she's in competition with her younger self. And I liked that as well.
Oh, I like that a lot. And I like
Yeah.
what you, Kitty, I like what you said about when you would go for a run. It's like, what would I do to make it better during when you're in that low part, or in the next 10 years? I do this, what I call the bathtub test, which is, who do I want to become at 60? If I'm in my lows, or if I were, because I didn't ever get very low, but who do I want to be in 10 years, and how do I get there? So
Mhm.
ask yourself a few questions if it seems like it's low times, and ask yourself a few questions. Who do you want to be in 10 years, and how can you get there? And you don't have to get all the way there. I always wanted to be able to sing like Barbara Streisand, and I will never make it, But I gave that one up and looked for other things. But I would say, having been through the midlife transition and the menopause transition, that at 60 I was very calm. I felt like I was at peace with myself and the foolish person I was when I was in my 20s and 30s, and I was a happy girl. I still am a happy girl.
Right? And I think the good parts just keep getting better.
Yeah. Well, we hope all of you listening are on the upswing of the U-shaped curve of happiness. And if you aren't, take some time to spend with friends, reach out, and if you're really struggling, talk with your clinician, because they can help. And keep listening to the 7 domains of midlife. We have posted the physical domain already, and upcoming will be the social and financial and intellectual and environmental and spiritual domains of this amazing time of life. Listen to the Kirtley and Katie show, and we're going to help you think about this middle part of your very own life. Thanks for listening.